Good evening and welcome to the Pompey Politics Podcast.
I'm Ian Tiny Morris.
And I'm Simon Sansbury.
Good evening, Simon. It would seem, despite my desperate attempts to keep the focus on local issues, that there have been certain events happening at a national level which are somewhat unavoidable. And in the absence of a podcast next Sunday, we've opted to do a Tuesday night special.
It did. So thankfully, no one said to us on Sunday that they would see us next Tuesday. But here we are. So yes, we're going to take a bit of a journey around Westminster, or the issues at Westminster, or the latest episode of Tories Got Talent. It's now the autumn season, I guess. But with us, much like we did the other day, where we had where we asked Ian to step to the other side of the microphone, as it were, to help Simon Bosher, or to join Simon Bosher, giving a bit of a local perspective. We are now also joined by a Conservative member, Paddy Bergen. So welcome. Thank you for joining us, Paddy.
You're more than welcome.
Yes, they say that misery shared is misery halved. So thank you, Paddy, for coming to join me on the on another tricky episode for those of us that have historically flown the blue flag. So I will metaphorically climb to be alongside you virtually, and Simon can rub his hands together with glee and head down his route of questioning.
I'm sure.
Okay. Lovely. Well, so let's get started. So, Paddy, as we've now outed you as a Conservative Party member, not that I'm sure that was a secret to anybody that knows you. How long have you been a member, and why did you join? What got you into it?
I cast my first vote for the late Lady Thatcher. I was a soldier. I was on a tour in Northern Ireland in 77, 78, and up came 79. And Anne politician, who I knew nothing about, said that she was going to give me a 32% or so pay increase. And I found that rather appealing. And so, like many people in that time, I voted Conservative. I didn't necessarily vote for Lady T, but I voted for the party. And with an exception of 4 years in my life, I've remained loyal to the Conservative flag.
Okay, interesting. And what were those 4 years, if I might ask?
John Major becoming the leader of the party, I became not anti-EU, because that sounds awful, because it wasn't the EU in those days, but I really didn't like the whole European gig from about 85 onwards. And I, rightly or wrongly, it was something I couldn't sit well with. And as we approached, you can, however you want to frame it, the becoming or the creation of an EU, and John Major was all over it, and I just couldn't support the party at that time because it was against my beliefs. But I'm a good Tory. I didn't vote for anyone else. I just couldn't vote.
Didn't vote for them.
Conservative,
right.
No.
Okay, no, that's cool. You had principles, you stuck to them. Not much of that about these days in some parts of Westminster. So, Ian, I know that some of our listeners will probably take your answer to that question as read, but should we have it for fill-in?
Yeah, so in terms of, I am not a lifelong Conservative supporter. My first foray into voting was around the mid-80s, and on from then. And I was a Labour supporter, and I backed Tony Blair, and was a little bit of an idealist, and held some fairly socialist views at the time. I think in terms of, as I got older and started to look at things, I migrated. They say sometimes as you get older, you move from sort of socialist to capitalist, and that was a journey I undertook. But I never joined. I would have described myself as a conservative, and when we started the podcast 3 years ago, was more than happy to identify as one. But I didn't actually join the party until relatively late in 2019. So it was a case of For me, I felt, I call myself a Conservative supporter. I'm regularly on social media platforms, and this identity, I felt that I should probably put my 25 quid where my mouth was, and so signed up after Boris had been elected, but before the 2019 election. So the old long-time listener, first-time party member would be a fair description.
Okay, and just for openness, I joined the Liberal Democrats in 2015.
So you are 7 years in. No,
Yeah. So I joined, and then it went downhill. So that's enough about that. I've still got a membership card with a picture of Nick Clegg in my wallet, so it's not doesn't sound stalkerish when you say it like that.
No,
not. Okay, so bringing us back to obviously the issue of the hour stroke week stroke summer. How the first leadership election, we'll call it the first leadership election, but the most recent prior to this one, the one that took place in the summer. I'm saying that for explanation purposes, not to have a dig. So was that a fair fight? Do you think that kind of whittling it down to end up with Liz and Rishi? What do you think, Paddy?
No. Well, it was a process, and it's an established process, and you have to accept that however you go about chopping and changing leadership, you have to garner support, you have to get people behind you, and you have to do what you've got to do. But it became painfully obvious really early that I've used this on social media, and you'll have read it, but the cabal that wanted Rishi Sunak to be in charge were never going to change it. Now, I can't prove this, but I look at dozens and dozens of fully Tory backing sites on a regular basis. And there was never a mood that said, Rishi's the man for us or Liz is the woman for us. They weren't in the running. They were running third and fourth the whole time. The decision was clearly made that Rishi had to be the Prime Minister. Now, that's for the Ian Bradys and all the rest of them to work out. Where it got gnarly, in my view, is that, and I am a big fan of Penny. I've met her many times, and I'm not sure she's ready to be PM, but I still have that thing that I think she could, is that the machinery worked to ensure that the only person Rishi Sunak was beating in that original contest, other than Tom Tugendhat, who occasionally he beat, but not always, but he always beat Liz Truss. And suddenly, miraculously, the final vote was Rishi Sunak or Liz Truss. And we members, some who take it very seriously and some who take it less seriously, I guess, we had a choice to make. Do we have what's foisted upon us? And there's a backstory that I won't go into now about how, the Prime Minister was unseated and all those things. But the bottom line for myself and many others was no, I don't want someone to be foisted upon me. I want a choice. But it was a binary choice. And so I'm left with someone I really don't want because I'm really unhappy, and someone I've not got any idea about really, but she's making the right noises at this time. And bearing in mind, whoever took over had two simple choices, which for me was austerity on rails or the notion of growth and low taxes, etc., which are actually, despite what anyone might think, true conservative values. There's not a lot of conservatism going on in that group, but I, as a member, was left with that choice. It's not a choice I would have made. I would not have had Liz Truss in the final two, but I wouldn't have had Rishi Sunak either.
Okay, interesting view. Ian, what were your views on that on the first time round?
Yeah, very similar in that I watched the debates with interest. Again, the affection and the kind of esteem that the PCP felt about Rishi Sunak, I didn't see that reflected in any of the sort of groups or with any of my Conservative chums that I speak with. So initially I was very much in sort of Paddy's camp, which is, well, if you tell me which way to vote, I'm not going to. I actually went to my first political event. So Liz Truss came to Southsea, and I heard her speak, and I was actually, I was able to get on board with a lot of what she was saying. Some of it was a bit further right than I'd like, but again, it's a case of you play to the home crowd. But this no more handouts piece, was something that I thought, well, that's something I'm very on board with. Ultimately, government can't keep giving away money that isn't theirs and borrowing more. So I was very on board with that. And so when I eventually pressed the electronic button to vote for Liz, I did it in a more positive. It was more of a positive choice than it's not Rishi. But ultimately, if you would have given me the choice of, Tom v Rishi, or Kemi versus Rishi, or Penny versus Rishi, then I would have picked all of those three ahead of Rishi, and I would have picked all of those three ahead of Liz. So, from a personal perspective, I was left with my fourth and fifth choice candidate, which I think, was the polling of many of the Conservative members. And whilst I think we kind of didn't like it, there was an element of, okay, that's the process. We're going to have to play along, even if we perhaps don't like the rules.
Yeah, entirely.
Okay. I don't know what I've done on the keyboard there, but something seems to have gone wrong on my. So excuse me while I try to figure that out. So, yeah. So in that respect, I think Ian, you've articulated why you backed Liz. So Paddy was kind of what Ian was saying there about why Liz rather than Rishi. It was kind of it wasn't his preferred, but was, the if I may paraphrase you, Ian, the least awful of what you considered the options at the time. Does that kind of speak to what you were saying earlier about kind of being effectively railroaded into making the decision?
Yeah, well, yes and no, because I'm in kind of the camp with Ian on this one, is that we are what you would call fiscal conservatives. We're not, we don't sit in the same camp for lots of reasons. Well, we made together, but not when you look at the party and the way things have done. Issues have happened, things have been foisted on government which are uncontrollable, and we could, you could reel off a list of reasons, or some would call them excuses, depending which side you sit on, why lots and lots of things haven't gone right. But in terms of the candidates that we had, for me, and it deeply cuts me, that I needed to be given a choice that I thought the membership wanted, and I wasn't. So I looked, like Ian said, I really looked hard at everything. And I came to my choice. I would have voted for a spanner over Rishi Sunak because of the way it was put in front of me. Not because I was thinking sensibly or logically about the right things, but because I felt railroaded, as you mentioned. I felt I was being given Hobson's choice. You're going to have what you have and like it. And as we've seen in the second competition, we were going to have what was going to be had, whether we liked it or not, because we weren't given an opportunity this time around.
Yeah, and there's a bit of me that wonders, without kind of going into depth in it, there's a bit that kind of wonders that it's a bit of a parallel with the Brexit vote, in the sense of we're going to present you with the way you should vote, by telling you that the alternative is so absolutely goddamn bloody awful that you can't possibly consider choosing it. And almost there was a bit of arm folding that said, no, I'm not going to be fucking told what to do. Excuse my French. I'm going to make a decision. I'm not going to do what you're telling me to do. I'm going to make up my own mind, and I'm deliberately going to do that. Is there kind of like
I think there are echoes to that, Simon. I think that, again, without wishing to unpack that whole arrangement, you could very much argue that there was an establishment position, which is, this is what you should do, and a little bit, well, the establishment knows best, so do as you're told. And there's an element of, a certain swathe of people, and perhaps it's just the way some folk are wired, are, if I may quote from the great Rage Against the Machine, I just won't do what the F you tell me to. So I think there are echoes to it.
I'm struggling on the audio here, guys. But if we're trying to compare the EU vote to what's going on at the moment, I would definitely struggle with that. I think they're two very different kettles of fish. What's gone on at the moment is we have a new Prime Minister that most of the paid up members would not have elected had they been given the choice of a wider field. The rules don't work like that, and we're democratic people. We have to accept the rules. We don't like them very much. But most of us want him now to go on and be really successful and sort some stuff out, because it pays nobody for him to get it wrong.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point, Paddy. I mean, certainly, despite as I was saying earlier on, I'm an outside observer, but no one is sitting here enjoying this, because as you'll say, that's in no one's interest, is it, for it to go really, really badly. So yeah, that's an interesting point. Okay, so staying with you then, Paddy. So do you think that that it was Liz the architect of her own downfall, or was she just? Did she just?
I don't know what quality of audio you're getting from me, but yours is very broken up. But I think you asked if I think Liz Truss was the architect of her own downfall, and if that's correct,
we're hearing you loud and clear. You're fine.
Couple of things on that, really, and I'm not going to be super defensive of Liz Truss, because I think her heart was in the right place, but her head was all over the shop. She said all the right things. You can build, you can do, as I said earlier on, you can have austerity on steroids, or you can try and build and grow. But you don't build a house up from the ceiling, you build the floor up. And she seemed to go wild to go for the ceiling and announce things that I think this is one of the key problems I have with the party, is that if you're going to say something really important that could impact the markets, you might want to test the ground on what such statements, what the impact might be. And I felt that we had this avalanche of this, that, the other, blah, 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 blah. And without the slightest foresight, if you will, because surely, I'm sure we've got lots of people who get paid lots of money to look at what goes on around the world. It seemed to me that there was no, almost like project management. I'm an ex-service delivery manager. Whenever I ever did anything, I kind of looked at the impact a long way down the road on any move I ever made, because if I made a move and it went horribly wrong and I hadn't predicted it, then it was my butt on the line. And I just feel she was desperate to get it all right really quickly, but didn't have the tools in the box, or, to be fair to her, to support in the box either.
Okay. Good view, Ian?
Well, worst Liberal Democrat Prime Minister we've ever had is my opening gambit. A former Lib Dem, shall we say? No, I mean, for me, I don't think she ever was going to be able to. She was ever going to have a long term as Prime Minister, because I think the PCP, there were already letters in Graham Brady's in tray before she ever sat in number 10. So I think there was always the mood was against her. But ultimately, for me, she accelerated her own downfall. I was very clear there, no more giveaways, apart from 2 days into her tenure where she announced a £90 billion giveaway and, basically said, oh, yeah, but I'm pro-business, so I'm not going to take that. I won't be putting in a windfall tax. And I just think, well, I'm pro-business as well, but I can't, as a fiscal conservative, I can't get behind 90 million of giveaways and somebody else takes £100 million worth of profit. So, that set my alarm bells ringing. We then had it was the biggest mini budget you've ever seen in your life. And when that contained and by the way, we'll spend a couple of billion reducing the top rate of tax. I had my head in my hands. And, again, that was then followed on the Sunday with, her basically sitting there and saying, well, the Chancellor, he didn't tell me nothing, mate. I never knew he was going to do that. That was a surprise to all of us. And I just thought, oh, that's such a bad look. From a leadership perspective, you can't be chucking your chancellor under the bus. And then she, as Paddy as a bus driver, she then reversed the bus over him only a week or so later. And at that point,
the optics were dreadful.
They were just at that point. And again, that interview the day before she resigned, again, I can't see her, but I pick up in tones of people's voices. She sounded like an absolutely broken woman. Will you be leading the Conservatives at the next election? And she sort of sighed and went, definitely. And you went, well, if that's intended to convince anybody, the first person you've got to convince is yourself, and you don't believe a word of that. So for me, did I think she'd last longer than 45 days? Of course, yes. But I think if people look and say, oh, well, she was turned on, I don't think those that were going to turn on her needed to. She created her own house of cards and then kicked it over.
Interestingly, if I may, Ian, when I listened to many of the things she said in the campaign, and maybe because of a certain amount of bias, because I didn't want to have a PM foisted on me, I was interested to hear what she had to say, and a lot of it made real sense.
Yep.
Then the moment of delivery came, and suddenly it didn't. And if you're going to do something, do it. If you're going to do something and reverse it in 20 seconds, probably better not to.
Yeah, and I think that's that key point about integrity, and I think that's where a lot of my fundamental issues are at the moment. Again, my sort of, I've got what could be considered to be old-fashioned values. I think if you are campaigning for somebody's vote and you make your position very clear, I don't think reversing that position in 3 days is right, equitable, or fair. It
isn't. It makes a mockery of you. I've done it. I've campaigned, and if I, with the limited level at which I've campaigned, but I've never ever once said to somebody, "Give me your vote, and tomorrow you win the lottery." I've always said, I'm interested in that wall down there, or this bit, or that bit, or whatever I might do, and people might be engaged by that. The level of the position and the frenzy around politics at that time, and I do have some sympathy for her. I've got to say, on a human level,
yes, of course,
she must have been sat in wherever she sits, sobbing, realizing that, you know what, I had it all going on. It was all going to work for me. I was going to do this and I was going to do that, and then the real world kicked in, and suddenly nothing was going on. And on that level, just on a human level, I feel for her. But the architect of her own downfall, I think, to a large extent, yes, and that's quite sad, because sad for a Conservative supporter, because it just made it look like even more mayhem, as if you could possibly have any more mayhem with the whole joke factory that had been Parliament over the last 6 months to a year, and then suddenly the woman is in, she's destroyed. So it's not a good look. And it's awful. And I really think it's awful. But it had to happen.
Yeah.
Well, if you take someone on to drive a bus and they crash it on the first day, and they take out another one and crash it on the third day, you don't let them come to work on the fourth day. You kind of there's a point where you have to say, we never expected perfection, but this is like beyond the pale a bit, isn't there? There's the point where you have to take that ownership back off of them.
It's not all about, sorry, in all due respect, I mean, a lot of these things are out of the control of the individual trying to do the best job they can do. They step up to the plate because they believe they can do it. It was gerrymandered, and I make note. But the reason I burnt my membership certificate is because the whole thing was gerrymandered in the first place. So it happened, and she became, and she got the vote. And the real powers that be, sometimes I think, I'll probably get shot for this, but they call it the Brady Bunch, the old school, the guys, the ones that really, really run the party. Never mind what you or I might think. she was doomed from day one. She was doomed because she wasn't the chosen person. She wasn't the one that they wanted. And so, and everything else that followed falls very much and very nicely in line with that. And so we are where we are.
Yeah. No, I think you're absolutely spot on, Simon, in your analysis that you can't be allowed to keep doing the job when you're getting it that wrong. I think, you know, as Paddy articulated there, at a human level, you know, there is an element of, you know, people can blame the members. You know, I get that, and you know, I take that squarely on the chin. But there's an element of she was never supposed to win, and you know, there's an element of you know, it was, you know, we were manipulated, and we were meant to be engineered to vote for Rishi, and it was a coronation, and that didn't happen. So yes, architect of our own downfall. You know, for me, lack of principles, lack of resilience in terms of, you know, if you believe what you believe, and that mini budget was the plan, then ultimately, you know, you had to stick by that, and you had to back it. You couldn't, you know, that was the optics of, oh well, it was the Chancellor, isn't he rubbish, we better get rid of him. That for me, at that point, you've got to go. You can't in any senior leadership position, you know, and Paddy's been in the army, you can't blame the troops for your failure.
No, and Ian, in all fairness, that's when we go back to foresight. When you look down the road at what everything, if you want to rush things in and you really want to make a big impact because you want to show the whole nation that you're going to drive the economy, you're going to do this or you do that, then you either buy it or you don't. And when you're the leader, don't start shooting the troops for delivering the message you gave them.
Absolutely.
You know?
Yeah.
The guy's gone out. He's made a big announcement that I have no clue if Kwasi Kwarteng was confident in everything that was going on in front of him. But he delivered his piece. He did what he was supposed to do, and he got one in the back of the head. And he got it because it was clearly and quickly, really obviously, a really bad idea. Go back to the original thing I said some while ago. You should have seen that coming.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll just pick up on some of the something we got in the comments there. So Scott is saying, so Truss was an awful choice. We've got Raymond saying that she was basically from day one. And Scott goes on to say, reality is you can't sack a chancellor after 6 weeks. Any workplace shows that if someone goes after 6 weeks, it's generally because the management got it horribly wrong and need to blame someone.
Yep. Always.
Yeah. And it's, you know, the guy got up, delivered her message, and got the boot for it.
I don't have it to hand, but there's a really good story about a rowing boat race where one team had 20 rowers and kept winning, and another team had 19 managers and one rower. And after 6 years of debate, they decided to sack the rower because the whole thing wasn't efficient. You know, that's kind of where you can be at in these things.
Yeah, you can overanalyze, can't you? I guess that I can understand that, but it does seem and like you both said, it seemed a poor choice to. I think it was the open of the Conservative conference, wasn't it? It was effectively chucking Kwasi Kwarteng under the bus by the start of the conference, and that does nothing to back up. It was one of the rare times I've agreed with Nadine Dorries, I have to be honest. You know, chucking him under the bus in that way at the start of a conference, it's not a good look.
Let's set the tone.
Any way you cut it.
Yeah. It doesn't make you look good. It doesn't make them look good. It doesn't make anybody look. Nobody wins out of that, and that's the shameful.
But as a member, it makes you feel dreadful, Simon, because we all have our beliefs, and we have our political leaning. Liberal Democrat, Conservative, whatever. And I've got good chums that I work with who are hardcore Labour, and some are less hardcore, and some are Liberal Democrat, and some are in some weird parties I've hardly ever heard of, which seem to be growing. That's all very good, you know, but it became quite visceral debates around what on earth has just gone on. I mean, I'm talking about among Conservative members now on the sites that go on. You look at that conference and you go, what? The last time she said anything even vaguely funny, it was about pig semen, and she wasn't being funny. She just looked stupid. Right. And then, so that there's a nastiness happened. There was some sort of China deal. it got really uncomfortable. And as a member of the party, you have to be, taking the flak from everyone, and it's real easy right now. If you're a Tory, it's incoming. You've got air warning red every 2 minutes because it's inbound and you're getting it, and most of it, if you stand up for your party, you probably deserve. So it's real hard to be, to try and step up and talk about conservative values. I haven't seen those values for too long.
Yeah.
Go back to, I think Ian would have said the same thing. In fact, he did. Fiscal conservatism is not about what we've been seeing for too long, for a long time. And we now have a prime minister who, and I want him to do well. Please do well, because the country needs you to do well. But it's not my choice. It's not the majority Conservative Party's choice, but he is the prime minister. And so, do well. Please do well.
Yeah. Okay.
But how that feels for a Tory when it all starts to go a little bit Pete Tong, it's very hard.
Yeah, I can understand that kind of foot in mouth kind of moment where you just kind of hang your head in shame, try to kind of pretend that because there isn't, there's
you've got a choice.
Yeah, you've got no choice. You either and we'll get to kind of what the choices were.
Yeah.
So talking about the most recent leadership. So obviously the surprise announcements over the weekend, and shortly before the 2 p.m. deadline on Monday, were that Boris Johnson and Penny Mordaunt withdrew from the race. And therefore kind of setting up the fait accompli that we have, and therefore meaning that the members aren't. Doesn't need to go to the members because there's only one horse in this race. Were you surprised when Boris and Penny withdrew, Paddy?
Was I surprised? No. Number one, I didn't believe for a moment that Boris had 102 votes. He might have done because, remarkably, and for all of the buffoonery, he's actually very popular amongst a lot of members. And, I can't hide from that because it's true. But he rushed back from Dominican Republic. I was there a few years ago. It's a 10-hour flight. He came back on an economy flight to get in. I thought, hang on a minute, is this bloke really going to step up? And the rumours were he had 102. I watched Penny on Laura Kuenssberg on Sunday, at which time I think she had 26 declared. It was looking a bit, but she said she was quietly confident. Now, I've met Penny a number of times, and I thought, well, if she says she's confident, then I'm pretty okay with that. Then the afternoon follows, or rather the meeting between Boris and Rishi. Well, I don't know. I can only imagine what that conversation was like, and I wait to see the cabinet being built. And then Boris pulls. So there's one contender in it, and Penny Mordaunt, and I will not be, I don't care what anyone says, and I hope you get on that thing and start chattering away and telling me, she was without question the number one favourite amongst members from the last competition and this one. She did run very close to Kemi Badenoch, who I know very little about, but the bottom line is Penny was up there, boom, 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 all the time. And I thought, well, it's a done deal. Penny will get the job. All of a sudden, Penny's on 90, an hour or so before the deadline, half an hour, I'm not quite sure, because I had it on a live news feed, because I was, I'm a big fan of Penny Mordaunt, but there you go. And she withdraws. So I took a piece of paper, put it in the bin, and set fire to it, because for me, there's more to this than meets the eye. And I'm not into QAnon and conspiracy theory and all that kind of thing. I think the bottom line was the committee said, listen, we have to stabilise the ship. We've got behind Rishi. He's getting the job. We don't want it to go to members, because if it does, Rishi loses. And I hope Ian would agree with that, because if it was a two-way split, I think Rishi does lose. I don't think it would be a landslide, but I think he would lose. And that's not what's required. So we, the members, who pay our 25 or 30 quid my time, by the way, last year, a month, why? I can still vote. I don't need to be a paid member to vote. So, and that's where my anger came from. I don't know. Is the truthful, honest answer, I don't know. It's just too fishy for me. the way it was done. It's been done from the top. These are career politicians. They've been told what to do, and they've done
it. Ian, how did you feel about them pulling out?
Yeah, I was surprised that Boris put his hat in. I was also surprised that he took his hat out. So, there is an element of my prediction was that he would win when there was talk of them being three, because I think, for me it was his ego and the well, you need Bozza back, I thought was the narrative that was writing itself. So I was very surprised when he withdrew. But when he withdrew, for me then, I watched the same interview on the Sunday morning on Koonsberg, and I thought, well, if you're not done and dusted now, the best you can hope for is to scrape over the 100. And again, when it got to the Monday morning, and Rishi, I think, had 178, and I think that Penny had something like 53, so it moved up. But there was an element of, for me, there was talk that Penny might take it to the indicative vote for all of the MPs and would then withdraw. For me, the writing was on the wall then that, between them, the MPs engineered the last ballot, and they engineered this one to the point where there would be no vote. Because for me, and again, you've only got to look at any of the opinion polls, Penny wins that vote. It is, it's never in doubt. So, for me, I heard the announcement from Sir Graham Brady, and I hit send on my resignation email to the Conservative Party, because for me, principles are more important than outcomes. And I think that if you're a member of the party, and imperfect as the decision-making process is, and whilst I don't like the first, Rishi versus Liz, I at least got to exercise my democratic right. And for me, the arrogance of the parliamentary party, who have seen...
And that's the point that we lose Ian's connection. Can you still hear me?
Ian's gone all frozen, but I can tell you that I 100% endorse what he's just said. And I think from the basic member of the party, it is the legitimacy now. It's about we as individuals who pay into the system and do what we do, and we campaign. We're the ones that deliver leaflets. We're the one that knock doors. We're the one that get abused in the high street when you're at a stall. We're the ones that do that. And all we ask in return for our loyalty is honesty and legitimacy. And I think that Ian and I might be the only two people who were members of the party. Well, I still am, because although I burnt my thing, I paid for a year, so I'm technically still a member. I don't know if I can get a refund. But the truth of the matter is, you feel like you're not really part of the game. You're not part of the thing that you joined, that you wanted to promote, that you believe in, and the sort of politics that you think is right. And fiscal conservatism has not existed in our party for far too long. It's almost as if politics has become a social media game. Like we three guys are having this chat on here, which is and great and marvelous. And then tomorrow, if you said something controversial, Si, or I did, or Ian did, even though this is on a Pompey podcast, any one of us could be destroyed by it, because that's how the world works. And in politics, I really feel that now, that we're not getting honest. I want honest Labour. I want honest liberal democracy. I want honest conservatism. I want honest, whatever you are, be what you purport to be. And the Conservative Party, for me, has stopped being that. It just doesn't offer me what I believe conservatism is.
Okay. No, that's a really a really thoughtful comment and line to take on that, and it's an interesting view, especially from two people that have essentially cancelled their membership because of the events this week. So you didn't get so was it essential to speed up the process this time, or
No. For me, Simon, it was the ultimate piece in engineering. last time they attempted to engineer the result and didn't get the result they wanted. So this time they were, the prototype version 2.0 was going to be de-risked, and the risk was
and it was we were contemptuous not to go with what they wanted in the first place, and we didn't know our place. The membership didn't understand its place. It should have fallen in line immediately, and we failed to do that.
Absolutely, Paddy. And I think that for me, this is where, when Paddy talks about defending the indefensible, and I've been across social media through some very difficult times as a Conservative, but there's an element for me of, again, the Conservative Party that I considered myself part of, was not the arrogant, entitled rich looking down on the proles and judging them and treating them with disdain. But I actually feel that's how we as members have been treated, that we are, we simply don't understand. We don't have the capacity to know that they had chosen their boy in Rishi, and how could we possibly not crown him last time? So we were made to go and sit on the virtual naughty step this time. We're going to take you're not going to have any pudding because you didn't eat all your greens last time. Well,
Correct.
we didn't want Rishi. Well, the party elite know best, so go and sit on the naughty step. You don't get a vote this time.
Well, but that's exactly how it's gone, and it's so bizarre because I got friends who are Liberal Democrats, by the way. So I'm not anti-Liberal Democrats. I just can't vote for Liberal democracy. But I got chums who are, and some of them have even extended almost an olive branch of pity for my thinking around what's gone on, because even they struggle and they loathe and despise the Tories, and I think you well know that. Yeah, I'm within 100% on this one. I have failed to play ball. I have failed to fall in line. I watched Doctor Who the night. I can't remember, the Cybermen. It's one of those. I failed to become a Cyberman and just march in line and utter the words that whatever the Cybermen are supposed to utter in complete accord and agreement with the master or whatever it might be. I don't know where this goes. Again, I'll go back to what I said earlier on. I really, really, really want Rishi to do a good job because it impacts upon all of us. I'm a 25 grand a year bus driver with £1,000 a month rent and council tax bill before I even begin to buy food. So I know what it's not like, not to be doing great out of this. During the COVID period, while people were bitching because they only got an extra £20 a week for 18 months, I lost £1,700 by being furloughed and getting paid 29.4 hours a week. I know what it's like to go through it as a bloody Tory, excuse my French. It hits us all. What I don't like is when such monumental things are going on in the world. You need consistency and stability, and my own party has singularly failed to deliver any part of that. And that hurts to the core. Ian said he joined it when he joined. It's 40 odd years. I'm 63 in a couple of months. I was coming up to 20 the first time I could vote in a general election. It's a long time. I had my gap because of John Major and the EU and all that fun stuff. But the truth is, it hurts to your core when you watch your beliefs, things that you think matter to people. Sometimes those values, by the way, are reflected by Liberals. They're reflected by Labour people. These are values about people. And it's painful to watch. But we have to fall along, put on our Cyberman hat and nod to the master and do it. No, we don't. And I think there's going to be serious ructions unless Rishi pulls the biggest rabbit out of the biggest hat. I think the Conservative Party is going to be in a world of pain real quick. In terms of membership, I'm not talking about its vote. I think that's already doomed. But these are not good times. Not good times at all.
Passionate and right from the heart. So I really appreciate that. Thank you, Paddy. So is this going to affect you? Obviously, you've both terminated your membership. But is this going to affect how you vote in the locals in the general election?
No. If you're talking to me, no, because in Gosport, and I don't care what people say about Caroline. I've been to her office more times than enough, and she is a hard grafting MP. She does a tremendous amount of work here, and I wouldn't care if she was a Green or a Liberal or whatever. She, as an individual, is a blooming good MP. People will slate me for that. I know that, because there's where there's a Caroline, there's a camera, and blah blah blah, and why is she a dame, and and her dad's Fred Dinage. And no, she's a grafting MP. She grafts, and she will keep my support until she ceases to graft. If she ceases to graft and doesn't do what I would want of my MP, I'll look elsewhere. But right now, no, and my support will stay with her as a person, as an individual. And the fact she happens to be a Tory MP is what it is. But
it's the oft explored conundrum that some people vote for parties, some people vote for person on the ticket, regardless of whatever type of election it is, and some people kind of like a bit of a mixture of both. And if you've got that personal connection with your MP, regardless of what house they sit in, then they've earned your respect and they've earned your vote. And I think that's a fair point. Ian, what about yourself when it comes to putting your
so very much the same as Paddy, really. When I look at it from a national perspective, I've got a lot of respect for Penny Mordaunt as our local MP. I've worked with her on a couple of things. I've found her very engaged. For me, she's doing a really good job for Portsmouth North. And similarly, when I look at the local Conservatives, for me, there is an element of that they are principally hardworking people who are looking to do the best for their community. And I think, it is one of the things that it is a sad fact that those of us who are heavily engaged, particularly at a local level, and I'll say this about, a number of folk who wear a different rosette, because we've had a lot of exposure in the last 3 years to councillors who are from parties different to our own. Now, those people are really hardworking individuals who give a lot of their time for very little reward for the people that they serve. And if I look last year, Frank Jonas was unseated in Hilsey, and was universally kind of praised by almost all parties in terms of being that hard-working local councillor. Now, my fear is that in May, that there will be dozens of local councillors who are Conservatives, who are going to lose their seats and lose their roles as a result of the shenaniganery that's gone on in Westminster. Because the narrative for those that aren't deeply politically engaged at the moment is, what a bloody mess. Your rent, mortgage, shopping bill is all going up because the Tories are buffoons. Now, that is almost entirely untrue, but it doesn't matter, because that's the mood. And if people aren't politically engaged, who might have voted Conservative out of habit or kind of history, they will vote elsewhere. So I will keep placing my cross in that box, not blindly, well, actually blindly, but no, not slavishly, but yeah, for me, it is about it's about those people, but at a national level.
Ian, with all due respect, if I can cut into you, Gosport became a Liberal-controlled council at the last election. And the reason Conservative councillors didn't get elected wasn't because they weren't good or hardworking, it's because they were Conservative. The national mood reflected into the local vote, because, generally speaking, turnouts at 23 to 25, maybe 30% on a really, really good day. The Liberal Democrats have I don't care what you think of them, they have a really good campaign team, and they really do bash the stuff out, and they bombard you with leaflets and everything else. And the Tories were so unpopular, it didn't matter. They were going to take it, so they did. And it's a shame, because at a local level, and I've always. I voted. Well, I lived in Blandford Forum for 2 years, and my local councillor was a Liberal. I lived on the base. I didn't need a councillor. I had no interest in a councillor. This guy was a firebrand. He never stopped, and he was bashing on people's doors and doing this, that, and the other. And I asked him one day, "What are you doing?" He said, "Oh, I'm the local councillor. I need your vote." He got it because he was that kind of guy. Because he was engaged, really melted into the local society, and I wouldn't have cared if he'd have said he was monster raving loony or whatever. He'd have got my vote because I never saw anything but his face bashing doors doing a job. Proper councillor, in my view. On a national level, they ask why people don't want a GE. I'll tell you why they don't want a GE, because there's about 300 Tories who want to keep a job right now.
Oh, yeah.
There's the thing about turkeys and Christmas, isn't it?
Oh yeah, I don't. I think it is. Again, if there was a, if there was a general election tomorrow, it would be the biggest landslide ever in British political history. I mean, that is very clear. So, there is that piece where, do I want a Labour government? No, with a but. And the but is, for me, and this is one of my reservations about Rishi Sunak and about the direction that we go from here. Because if where we go from here is high tax, high spend, if that's the way that Rishi chooses to run the economy, and doesn't make the appropriate savings, then I'm not sure that I haven't got a Labour government by default.
I almost certainly have. I mean, however you cut that mustard and with all due respect to the Liberal Democrat side, the truth of the matter is that at a general election tomorrow, the populist vote would see Mr. Starmer in, or Sir Keir Starmer in moments. But in terms of fiscal policy, if the country imagines for a moment that you change government and everything's all right, and there's money in the bank and the credit card isn't almost maxed out and you aren't paying back this huge amount of debt and the war stops in Ukraine and we don't have the enormous problems with the NHS, if somebody imagines that by changing a government, you change the scenario in which you work, then they need to give their head a wobble. Because I can walk out of my house having read a bill and feel really sad about it and go up the pub and have a few pints and feel okay. And then I walk back up, that bill still sits there and I've still got to pay it. And so this kind of mentality where change government, it'll all be good, doesn't work, because you've only got the levers to pull. All governments have the same set of levers. They may pull them in different directions and they may alternate how they cost, how they save, how they do this, how they do that. I listened to the Shadow Chancellor the other day. My youngest lad is a corporate governance lawyer and he deals with huge finance and he does all that kind of thing. And he's very angry. He's very angry about the Conservatives and has his opinions on these things. But there's nothing on offer that can change the environment into which somebody works. That doesn't mean somebody else shouldn't do it, and maybe somebody else can do it better. Rishi Sunak has got a heck of a job on his hands, and fairly quickly he needs to demonstrate either that he can control the ship a little bit and give us a direction of travel that most fiscal conservatives will take, even if it's a bit painful, they'll take it, or it's a walk in the park. Come 2 years' time is it now? I think is as far as they can stretch it out. It'll be a walk in the park. But if people think it's going to be ice cream and candy in 2 years' time because they elect another government with the same problems, they might want to think again.
Ian, your thoughts on the prospect of avoiding a colossal defeat at the next GE?
I think it has never been harder. If I use a boxing analogy, it's the 12th round and we've lost every round up till now, but we've still got a puncher's chance. But it is looking increasingly a long shot. At the end of the day, Labour have moved into a more centrist position. Sir Keir Starmer is more credible, is more appealing. He speaks to a broader audience than Labour were reaching out to before. I think in 2019, or as we had the run into 2019, there was no expectation of an 80-seat majority. So I think it is always difficult when you look at polls. But there's an element of even the most optimistic Conservative couldn't claim at the moment, that the margin of error in the polls is such that we would get away without an absolute hiding. I think that it is interesting to see whether we believe that, and I do wonder whether Rishi, will try and speak to Conservatives, or whether I see a lot of politicians now who almost ignore their membership and try and speak to the centre and to the folk in the opposition team who are closer to their position. Sir Keir Starmer, and again, I think respect due to him on that. He's turned his back on the momentum element in Labour. He's taken this zero tolerance approach to anti-Semitism, and he hemorrhaged a lot of grassroots members as a result of that. So I do wonder, as Rishi takes the helm, he's probably not looking to appease. Paddy and I have been very open on this podcast about how angry we are. And a very valid question you asked us was, well, how angry are you? Are you going to be voting for Labour or the Lib Dems? And our answer is clearly no. So there is an element that says, well, Rishi doesn't need to convince us to get himself back over, to get a Conservative government back over the line. He's got to speak to those people who are right of centre and centre of centre, who currently will put their ex against the Labour Party and the Lib Dems.
Okay, so I guess then that kind of naturally flows to. So you'll be relieved to hear, Paddy, this is the last question. So what would you want to see the PM do to reunite the party and set the country on the right track?
Where are we going with that? Is that myself or Ian?
You go for it, mate.
Okay. How do you reunite a party that's so divided at the moment? Difficult question. And it's a bit like, not about whataboutery. If you look at the Labour Party, you have the hard left, and those that are trying to bring it together. In the Conservative Party, we're in government, so we've got a problem, a huge problem. The centre of the party, I would suggest, isn't fit for purpose. It's my personal view. I can't speak to anyone else's opinion. The centre-left of the Conservative Party is dodgy at best. The centre-right, I don't know. If you want to bring the party together, then, it's not a task I would want to take on particularly, but you have to deal with what the electorate want. And whether people like it or not, the electorate would really like a bit more. I'll use the Pompey Politics page terminology because I'll be accused of it anyway. A bit more far-right discipline in terms of immigration, in terms of the benefits systems and all of those. And that will come with a wall of pain because it will flow back and people will say, well, you're cruel, you're unkind, you're this, that, and the other. But to stitch the party together, I'm not quite sure that there's enough cotton and needles to make that work. You have an old school of again, I said it earlier on, the Brady Bunch. You have the controlling factor within the party. You have those that want to be a bit more maverick and those that are kind of settled into where they are. And, we're good old Conservatives and it'll all be fine. Well, it's not going to be fine. This country needs leadership. And if you want to lead from the front, make decisions and follow them through. And the country will likely follow. Even some of the things that would be screamed at in our new age social media and all the rest of it, like getting a proper handle on immigration, and that's really important. Sorting out Brexit. Brexit's never happened. Some of my best friends were Remainers. I was a Leaver. We've never fallen out over it. We have a different opinion over it, but it's never been sorted. We're constantly assaulted with the failure of Brexit. Yeah, Brexit's never actually happened. We have so many issues that have been batting around in the atmosphere for years now. Priti Patel, a constant, hard, I'm going to get this done, and what actually got done was 2/3 or not very much. That seems to be, it's become unpalatable for the average voter. There's something, if you're going to say you're going to do something, you're going to say, will you just do it? Will you not pander around? The NHS, the perennial problem, the problem that will never go away, a massive thing that was set up for a society that no longer exists and simply can't function. You can never have enough money for the NHS. You could double what you pay it and it would still absorb it and people would still be in queues. There's so much to do. I think what the country needs, and whether it comes from the Conservatives or Labour or anyone else for that matter, what it wants is direction. It wants, I guess, to be able to believe that what you're being told is what people are trying to deliver. And it's not just some rhetoric that falls out of a politician's mouth because he's been sent to go on Politics Live or he's been sent to do the rounds, for breakfast news, because it sounds great and everyone will feel better in a minute, because people are hurting too much for that now. Things are too tight. That nobody is in that position where they go, it's all right, I'll be better tomorrow, because they're not. People are really hurting. People are struggling. And this, stop the rhetoric, give a plan, a way to deliver and follow it through. I don't care what political stripe was to do that, do it and you'll be fine. If he fails on that front, and people's patience is so short-sighted, he's only going to have a little while to fail on that front, and when he does, it just implode, like it's just imploded twice already in the last few months.
Thank you. Well, before I set you the next to impossible task, Ian, of following that, I'm just going to bring in David's quote from the comments to give you 30 seconds to try and claw something together. So David says, I think Rishi is more plausible than Boris. No change vote-wise, but my vote is based on the situation at the time of voting. Truss had me going to Labour. I swung back with Rishi, even though he is a scummer. For those listeners who are outside of the conflict, the football-based conflict between the cities Portsmouth and Southampton on the south coast of England, there's a long-time rivalry that someone better than me will be able to explain to you at some point. But Portsmouth fans call fans of Southampton as scummers, and ironically, Southampton fans also call Portsmouth scummers. So make of that what you will.
More ironically, historically, the Southampton fans are right to call Portsmouth fans scummers.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's
if
a whole
other history. That's all I'm saying.
Yep. That's great. So, Ian, if I can ask you to your response to what you want to see the new PM do to reunite the party and set the country on the right track.
Yeah. So rather than delving back into 30s industrial disputes and ports and people breaking strikes, which is where the origins of the Portsmouth, Southampton antipathy begins. I think there is a real issue, and to be honest, Simon, I think it is that the electorate and the world in general is not ready for any more hard messages. I mean, ultimately, COVID and everything that followed was not a party. It was not a great time. But we spent the most money we spent since the Second World War. So there is an element of, we've now got a massive bill for something we didn't want and we didn't enjoy. And so I think there is the hardest thing about politics at the moment is, being able to deliver a message of fiscal prudence or, austerity 2.0 or, whatever those messages are. There is nothing to give away. We've been trying to be populist and give away for 2-3 years and it's just not there. It can't be done anymore. And I think there is an element of, in trying to turn that round. Rishi was very popular during the pandemic across the political spectrum. So there is, if anybody's got a chance, he probably, having reflected on it, has got a better chance than most. Again, good friend of ours on social media, who used her own term of, if I'm a swivel-eyed lefty and I like Rishi, what's wrong with him? Why are you two so upset? And the answer is because if we look at the footballisation of politics, he's one of you. He's not one of us. So there is an element to perhaps give a more palatable message. But I think after 12 years, there is a pervading mood within politics that it'd all be just all right if we only change the colour of the rosette. And I think that might be a hill that's too steep to climb. And I think that, again, it's going to be the question of what sort of Conservatives do we get for the next 2 years, and what kind of Labour do we get for the next 5? And that's how I kind of feel at the moment. So I'm not feeling super optimistic, if I'm being honest.
Okay, well, that's well, we asked for your responses, and you've both certainly given them. So thank you very much. That draws us to a close. So despite wanting to do a quite short one, you've both you've given us a good show. Thank you very much for your responses, Paddy. They were passionately and eloquently delivered. Thank you, Ian, for yours. We always knew what your answers were going to sound like. And thank you for those of you that joined us and followed in the comments. You've been listening to the Pompey Politics podcast. I've been Simon Sansbury, and our guest has been Paddy Bergin. And on the other side of the mic for change has been...
I've been Ian Tiny Morris. No podcast this Sunday, but join us on the 6th of November when we will be back with some kind of entertaining podcast, even if we don't know what it is yet.
Even if we don't know who the Prime Minister is at that time, it's fine.
We'd hope it was still
on. There's an hour to go. And I'm Paddy Bergen. And thank you so much, gentlemen, for the invite to the show. I've really enjoyed it. Ian, absolute privilege. Always enjoy your banter. Simon, same. So thank you very much.
Thank you. You've been a great guest. You've been a true gent. Thank you very much. Join us next time.